Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time. How is everyone this morning? We have arrived at Friday, July the 24th, I believe. So the days and nights are relentlessly passing. Amazing how fast time flies. So, and for everyone in the chat giving me the confirmation sign, I'm glad everything's working. You can see me and hear me okay. That's a good place to start. So, one of the blessings of being a monk and a member of the Sangha is being part of this field of merit. And we talked I don't know, it was a few days ago or something about the practice of renunciation and the challenge of living the life of renunciation. But there are many benefits to taking up that challenge. And one of them is living supported by goodwill, free will, generosity of others. So, and primarily the very supports of our life come from that dynamic and that energy. Those who have faith, and it's not just Buddhist faith. I mean, it's interesting being a monk in America in these times. Sometimes ethnic Thais or ethnic Buddhists come to the monastery and they're looking around White Salmon and saying, how do you survive here? Are there many Thais or are there many Buddhists? And I say, well, I think there are some now in the community that consider themselves Buddhists, but the way we survive is there are good people with faith that this endeavor that we're engaged in is a worthy one. So, and our morning alms round and the meal support that comes from people is a huge part of that. It's like this daily leap into faith that there will be such beings in the world and accompanied by a faith that it wouldn't be tragic to go a day without food should it not manifest. All things considered. So I think today June might be in the chat here, and she's helping support our meal for the day, and just express my gratitude to her and her family, as well as the many, many people, both locally and further afield, who do that every day and have for 10 years. It's much appreciated by myself and the Sangha. And we aren't having the opportunity for these last 100-some days in the pandemic to share our anumodana directly with people, which is why early on we recorded a little video of ourselves, Ajahn Sake, myself, and Venerable Kantiko chanting the anumodana, and put it up on our YouTube channel. I even considered doing the anumodana cam. So every day right before we have our meal, we could stream the anumodana, but it felt like too much of a leap. We had a lot of other things kind of going on. So, but it's amazing and wonderful to live in this way. And for all of you that have faith in the endeavor and help supporting it, appreciate it. Yesterday, Mahisha, who in Sri Lanka follows time shifted our morning coffee stream here, and who does the timestamps, sort of sent me a copy of Ajahn Sona's new book, Bloom. So I get the opportunity to sort of read through this. I know several of you have, So looking forward to that. And thank you, Mahisha. I appreciate your generosity. It's amazing. Ajahn Sona's Dhamma teaching can come all the way from Sri Lanka via probably Amazon and other stewards. So let's see. Today, just a brief reminder, Ajahn V has Dhamma Talk live on Zoom at 4 p.m. And I probably should remind people a little more frequently that there are twice weekly Dhamma Talks from Abhayagiri, our home monastery. So that is another source. And then Amravati is doing things. I've been recently in contact with Ajahn Amro and some of the monks at Amravati who are investigating doing a bit more and maybe even doing online retreats at some point. So that would be tremendous. The retreat center at Amravati has been shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic. So, and it's still quite uncertain, like many retreat centers, when and if they could resume. So they're kind of looking at other options. So, I was listening to one of my podcasts this morning about happiness research, and the episode I was listening to today was all about the power of positive thinking, visualization, positive thinking, and much of it I had been exposed to, but then there was some interesting little bit of research about how there's more to the story. It's not a 100% unquestioned good. And if I remember it right, one of the things is, in some sense, we kind of trick ourselves through positive visualization that we've already experienced the object of our desires, or what it is that we kind of long for. And there was one researcher they were interviewing and talking to about some of the evidence of how there is a downside to that, and how it can be counterbalanced by actually what they call mental contrasting. So mental contrasting is sort of reflecting on what are the real obstacles, real challenges, and realistic negative obstacles or outcomes, or even like realistically how we might fail. So, and I was thinking how this relates a little bit to some of the reflective practices that we have, probably most strongly the 5 frequent subjects for recollection, meditations around aging, sickness, illness, and death. To the average person, it doesn't seem like a wise strategy for how to use your time, dwelling on the fact that we are inevitably subject to these forces, which are unwished for, unwanted, and that in imagination, it's hard to imagine those being very positive conditions. And a lot of the way, most of the time, we try not to think about those things. They're not subjects for polite conversation at your dinner party. Although maybe that's changing. A couple years ago, there's an initiative started, or a project started in the Columbia River Gorge here, where we live, that was explicitly focusing on this, and all the various small communities were organizing book readings and talks, discussion groups, and one of our local librarians in Hood River invited us to participate in a series of talks they had at the library called Grave Matters. And it's like carving out a space for people to sit down and intentionally sort of talk about issues of aging, illness, and death. And that was amazing, kind of just sitting around with a bunch of individuals. And we had a lot to kind of share from the Buddhist tradition and how this is, one might say, central to some of the themes that both inspired the Buddha to leave the palace and search for transcendence. Yeah. The story of the four messengers. The Buddha is confronted with these signs, these symbols, and he has faith, encountering the sight of a samana, that there is some way to deal with this, which is encapsulated in this search for the deathless. So there's a role for visualization and positivity, faith, confidence, imagining yourself in better outcomes. But the converse is true as well, preparing yourself for the realistic challenges that one might kind of face in life. And in some sense, some of the reflective practices we're doing, that we're creating a kind of very strong, skillful, wholesome atmosphere in the mind, and then consciously bring these things up to prepare ourselves for the inevitable challenges that these bring to us as we live our life. So that we, can kind of know our capacities, but also develop ability to understand these things and grow in acceptance of these things. And I guess you could say, in some sense, it gives you a chance to rehearse meeting these things with passion and equanimity and an enhanced sense of acceptance. Practice sort of meeting these challenges without undue suffering, without the second arrow inflicting ourselves with extra added suffering. So it's always nice to have your faith, and I guess you could say your biases, kind of confirmed from other quarters. But some of what I was hearing there seems to affirm through some modern research that this isn't a crazy endeavor. So can you speak to meditation with the nada sound? Ajahn Amro says he uses it the most. Yeah, I can do that. I'm familiar with both Ajahn Sumedho's teaching on what Ajahn Amro calls the nada sound. Well, I think Ajahn Sumedho does as well. It's a, for those not familiar with it, it's meditating on this kind of sound that one hears when we turn our attention to the sound of silence. So, we're directing our mind and our mindfulness to not any object of hearing, but to the hearing faculty itself. And the sound that we hear when we're in a very silent atmosphere or environment. And with a little practice, you can hear it in almost any environment once one learns to kind of recognize it, even a fairly noisy kind of environment. And it manifests in different ways for different people, like a ringing in the ear, or a little bit like the sound when you take a seashell and put it up to your ear. It's kind of like, some people hear it more as vibration. So, and this is something I spent several periods of time investigating it, inspired by some of Ajahn Sumedho's talks, and it's something I do on something of a regular basis. I've talked about it, I think, here before. Oftentimes I'll do it as a preliminary meditation, especially if when I first sit down, there's a lot of discursive thought going on in the mind. Rather than just going to the breath, sometimes I just open up sense of awareness in this kind of very unfocused way, giving attention to the hearing faculty. And then you just hear this fairly steady sound of silence. And one can practice kind of concentrating on that and to a certain extent absorbing into it. But Ajahn Sumedho talks about one of the reasons why he likes it is you can't quite absorb into it in the same way as the breath. And it acts as this very centering experience of what he calls a reflective state of awareness, rather than an absorbed state of awareness, which would be kind of the perfection of jhana samadhi. It's a more kind of open, reflective, inclusive practice of meditation. And I think both Ajahn Sumedho and Ajahn Amaro have talked about that feature of the meditation being something that attracts them to it, and I find the same experience from it. It's something like the breath that's always with you, so you can always kind of turn to it, and with a little bit of practice, you can summon it at will, or focus in on it at will, even amidst conversation, even amidst kind of activity and work. One can kind of turn to this kind of sound, and it's a wonderful object because it's always with you. It's subtle, like the breath, so it goes unnoticed unless one attends to it. And it does seem to kind of call forth and bring one sort of more fully into the present moment and arouse an enhanced sense of mindfulness and awareness. And you really have to practice kind of letting go, like not seizing on any particular sound or any train of thought or complication that might come from the contents or the objects of hearing. So it has a potential to be a little more challenging, say, than the breath. Like, you can't make a whole lot out of a breath. There's not a lot of liking and disliking or emotional connection to the breath. But sound, it's like it's good sound, it's bad sound, I like it, I don't like it, it's confusing, frightening, delightful, annoying. So something that's interesting with this kind of practice of the nada sound is there is a little bit of an extra challenge there, or opportunity to even sort of reflect on some of the nature of how the mind engages in liking and disliking and attaching to various things. And it's not such an absorbed state of mind, so that like one is still able to be in this very balanced, centered, present sort of state, but very reflective. So it's a very interesting state for contemplation. So, and I find it peaceful enough, so that it's quite delightful. So I recommend it. I think there's a little book, maybe called Inner Listening, that Ajahn produced a few years back, because this is a topic for a conversation that kind of would come up again and again when we were living together at Abaigiri. And I think in the early years I was there, Lumpur Sumedho hadn't even written a book about it. But if people are interested to know more, I oftentimes recommend looking for this little book called Inner Listening, I believe is the title, by Ajahn. And it's a nice short little introduction to the practice. And of course, there are loads of Dhamma talks and Q&A sessions that he and Ajahn Sumedho have had on the theme. So, good morning, Charles. Relational frame theory, or RFT, predicts how positive thinking connects through language systems to the negative. Typically, it's an unsuccessful strategy. Interesting. I have not read about relational frame theory. So am I correct in interpreting it's like positive thinking doesn't work because it brings up the negative? Because it's bringing up like a positive negative frame? That's how I'm interpreting that. So, which I guess is something like any worldly thing. With good, you invoke bad. Like there's always two ends of the spectrum. So you can't have praise without blame. You can't have success without failure. You can't have sukha, or happiness, pleasantries, without dukkha, or suffering. So, I'd like to know more at some point. How would you suggest we handle our diets as lay people so we don't struggle too much with overconsumption or weird diets our society can push us to follow? I think one thing that comes to mind is moderation in eating is something that comes up in the suttas, and the Buddha encourages the monks to be moderate in their eating. And monks oftentimes will experiment with fasting, and there's a whole culture of this in Thai forest monasteries, because it can have beneficial effects for people in supporting their meditation practice in particular. Like many human societies, there's a culture of fasting that has can have spiritual benefits. But Ajahn Chah he wouldn't forbid it, but he would apparently sort of encourage people to just try to be moderate in their eating. And I can't remember the exact quote, but there's something in one of his translated talks where he's talking about the most difficult practice is just to practice moderation. It's not how many days you can fast, but like a learning to be consistently sort of moderate in your relationship to food and diet. And then there's another there's another thing. I mean, there's a utilitarian attitude towards food and eating that's encouraged. And you see that reflected in a chant that we do on a very regular basis on the four requisites of robes, food, shelter, and medicines. And, the one on food is like mindfully reflecting, I take this food, only for the nourishment of the body, for helping the holy life, relieving feelings of hunger, not inducing new feelings of discomfort from overeating. And there's other reflections like, not eating it to sort of build the body up or make the body impressive, but the utilitarian function of relieving hunger and giving one enough sustenance and nourishment to kind of live for another day with comfort and ease. And I see a later comment here on my other little side window, sort of saying that you're anorexic and severely underweight. So yeah, fasting would not be recommended, and I would strive for moderation. And really focus on the utilitarian nature of food. Our food, in our relationship, can get kind of a bit complicated and messed up if we think too far away from the very real need to kind of relieve hunger and nourish the body for a day. You build a whole religion around it. There's a lot of personality around it, a lot of views and opinions around it, or it's tied very much to your body and your body image. It can get complicated and possibly generate a lot of dysfunction and suffering even. So, and it does seem to be a tendency sort of in modern societies to substitute food for religion. Some people are very religious about their food and their ideas about good food and bad food, and so anyway, just to sum up, I would say see if you could establish a very utilitarian attitude towards it and really like focus on the fundamentals of what it is we're doing there. We need to eat as human beings. We need a certain amount of daily nourishment. Hunger is very real pain. Should be alleviated if we can. And instead of thinking about eating perfectly or eating for your body to be this way or that way, try to reflect on the utilitarian aspect of it and eat sufficient food. So we don't really have, part of where we go wrong in relationship to diet and our bodies is very much tied to this misguided notion of desire connected to the body and self-identity in particular. You don't get to choose these bodies and you don't control them, and that's part of the truth of anatta. The other podcast I was listening to recently was a researcher on in the field of behavioral genetics, I believe is the name of the field. And he was talking about the current scientific understanding of how genetically determined body mass index is, or BMI. Your BMI is very heavily determined by your genes. And that probably sits at odds with the way most people think about their body and how fat or thin they are and how fat or thin they think they should be, or how easily it is for them to put on weight, or how difficult it is for them to put on weight. Most people are having a problem with how easy it is for them to put on weight in the world that they find themselves in and the environments they find themselves in. And there's a lot of self kind of tied up with that, notions of being a personal failure if your body doesn't behave the way you think it can. But if we pull back and reflect on the very definition that the Buddha gives to anatta, or no self, in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, it's like it's folly to take this body as self, as me, as mine, principally because it's not something that we can control. So we can be a steward, we can have influence, but ultimately it's not something that we control. So there needs to be a acceptance of the body that you have, and then I guess maybe a determination to learn how to be a good steward to the body you have, and learn how to relate to it as skillfully as possible. And the spiritual component of that, or the psychological component of that, is to accept it as it is, and not spend any time wishing and wanting and desiring it to be different than it is, or to meet some ideal that we carry around in our mind for this body. So, okay, well, I apologize for the in and out of the stream today, and also my inability to follow along with the chat. There's a lot of back and forth conversations going on there today, so that makes it a little extra difficult for me. But I'll have to leave it at that for today. Wish you all well. Have a great Friday. Or I guess part of the world's maybe already on to Saturday. So, and we'll see you all tomorrow on the morning coffee stream. So take care, friends. Bye for now.